Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with former advisor to the Labour Party, Scarlett Maguire, and the editor of Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. Hello to you both. So let's take a look at what's on some of those front pages now. The Metro leads on the growing anger over President Trump's immigration policies that have seen children separated from their parents at the US border. In The Guardian, intelligence agencies are warning that a Europe-wide security deal is essential after Brexit if governments are to be able to tackle terrorism. That story also in The Times, with the paper saying the intervention by the head of GCHQ into the Brexit negotiations is unprecedented. The Telegraph reports that the Culture Secretary wants teachers to ban mobile phones from classrooms. The Express says the rising cost of living means millions of people will have to continue working beyond retirement age. The FT reports that the growing trade war between China and the US has started to cause nervousness in the global markets. And the Mirror has a story about Ant McPartlin. And we're joined tonight by Scarlett Maguire and Brendan O'Neill. Hello to you both. We're going to start with the Metro. Its headline, "Furious Trump says migrants infesting the US." And it has a picture there, which is on several of the pages, those images of families being held in cages in Texas, in migrant processing areas. Scarlett.
I mean, the story is just completely horrendous, isn't it? For decades, centuries, I mean, there have been illegal immigration into America from Mexico. It has been dealt with in better or worse ways, but actually never before have you had a policy where you lock up the parents and take the children. And we've seen pictures of tiny little children, 2- and 3-year-olds, screaming. They have no idea what's going on. And then there was the terrible audio of the children crying and crying and crying, and a border guard saying, "This is just an orchestra." I mean, this is a policy where President Trump is using children as pawns to get his own way, and it's terrible. And what it's done actually is to make people understand that this can't go on. I mean, you've got Republican governors condemning it. You've got the first ladies. I mean, Laura Bush, five first ladies saying it's terrible. I mean, it actually means that finally they're going to actually talk about immigration and what it really and what should be done about it. But I think, I mean, it is the terrible, terrible thing about using these children as pawns. And then, you know, to show the polarisation that some right-wing people, I mean, a right-wing newsreader described these cages as summer camps.
Yeah, indeed. And they are very harrowing images, the audio, particularly of the children crying, extremely distressing. And yet Donald Trump in combative mood still on Twitter.
Yes, I think I agree with Scarlett. This is a horrendous situation, and Trump is behaving particularly immorally in relation to it, not only by allowing it to happen, but also by tweeting, as you say, in a combative mood and quite cockily about the whole thing, as if it was something to be proud of or something not to be ashamed of. So it's a really bad policy. It shouldn't be happening. Children should never be taken away from their parents in this way or used as political pawns, as Scarlett says. I do think, however, that it's become one of those issues through which it's very easy for people to appear virtuous. And I think that the problem with that, I don't have a problem with people comparing themselves, acting virtuously in comparison to something as unvirtuous as this. But the problem with that is that it detracts from the complexities of the situation. And the idea that this is single-handedly down to Trump and that Trump is the personification of evil and he has made this happen because he's such a terrible person actually takes away attention from the fact that the real problem is that Congress has failed again and again to reform immigration law or to push through any kind of immigration law, in fact, over the past couple of decades. And that's one of the serious contributory factors to this. So one thing that I don't like is you have the 5 former First Ladies and the current one as well, and you have former presidents, all of whom are being very critical of what's happening. However,
Obama known as the deporter-in-chief.
Well, exactly. So there are 2 points to be made about that, which is firstly that under Obama and also under Bill Clinton, not dissimilar things happened in terms of people being thrown out of the country unceremoniously and families being treated quite badly. But more to the point is the inability of the American political class more broadly to reform immigration law in a way that would make it fairer and more workable is the key problem here. And so I think this is really proof of how Trump bashing can be quite a distractive process, because it means that we're not seeing the bigger political picture.
No, the bigger was a massive issue for Trump on the campaign trail.
I was just about to say, I mean, the bigger political issue is that Trump has used immigration in the most appalling way. I mean, he began by saying we're going to build a wall and we're going to get the Mexicans to pay for it, which was always completely out of order. But Trump he's playing to a base as he sees it by doing this. So I think actually in this case, I don't agree with Brendan that actually Trump has used this policy. He likes this policy. He's defending this policy, and it's a deliberately punitive policy.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton and Obama, their policies was more subtle. I mean, they got results. The thing about Trump is he is deliberately punishing people.
No, but
let's bring in the Times on this as well, and then the Times talking about Trump's defence of the policy. Brendan?
Well, the thing is that if we say that Trump is the worst president ever and evil personified and like Hitler, which is what people are saying, what you're doing is, firstly, you are letting former presidents off the hook for some pretty awful things that they did in relation to migrants. So you're watering down what previous presidents did. Even worse, this use of Holocaust language, which appears on the front page of the Metro, which quotes people saying that this is like Nazi Germany, this is really out of order, because people are relativizing the Holocaust. They're diluting the great, unique crime of the 20th century by arguing that something like this, which is actually relatively routine in the way in which America deals with illegal migrants, by saying that that is just like Nazi Germany. So I think the language is over the top. The simplicity with which this issue is being presented is politically immature sometimes, and what we actually need is a broader take on what's happening in the US. And the key problem is not that Trump is evil. The key problem is that Congress cannot get a handle on immigration. What Trump is now doing, and this is wrong, what Trump is now doing is using this situation and using these children as a way of putting pressure on Congress to push through reforms. That's an immoral thing to do, but the idea that he is uniquely wicked on the question of migration just doesn't stack up in recent American history.
OK, let's move on to the front of the Telegraph, another major story today, and cannabis legislation.
Yes, so cannabis somehow, well, for obvious reasons, because of this recent story of the use of cannabis oil for medical reasons, cannabis has become a huge story again. It's really strange, I think, this story, because no one seems willing to make any kind of principled case either for decriminalisation or against decriminalisation. Everyone's falling back on questions of what's workable or what the science demonstrates or whether it's good to have this as a medicinal fallback. We need a bit of principle in this discussion. And my argument, the reason I think Sajid Javid is wrong to say that it might be possibly legalised for medicinal purposes but not for recreational purposes, is that there is a fundamental matter of freedom of choice and the right of people to decide for themselves what they ingest, what in terms of alcohol or drugs. No one seems willing to make that case for autonomy. So my view, I'm not a particular fan of cannabis. I think it kind of turns people boring. You know, it's called dope for a reason. So I don't think it's a good drug, but I think people should have the freedom to use it.
Also in the Times, 2 pages on this in the Times, Scarlett, let doctors prescribe cannabis. A coalition of experts urges the PM. So we're talking about medicinal use. So are we conflating 2 issues that we shouldn't be here?
Well, yes, and I think the conflation actually happens it happens Brendan's way, that nobody's going to talk about legalising. But I mean, why on earth can't one use cannabis medicinally? It just seems completely and utterly mad that if you find
we grow it for medicinal purposes.
Precisely. If you find something that works and actually seems to save children's lives in this case, then of course it should be used. And there's this weird thing that because it's cannabis, because some people smoke it for fun, right, you can't use it for medicine. And I absolutely don't understand. The other, I mean, then you get on to the legalisation, where every political party is absolutely terrified of saying, why not? I mean, you know, you go, oh, I mean, and there certainly are problems with cannabis, apart from the fact that, yeah, you're pretty boring if you take a lot, and the cannabis these days just puts you out. I was in Colorado where it is legal, and it was like going to a town where everybody was stoned. But I have to say, my landlady, my Airbnb landlady, said it was incredibly good for the economy, and they got lots of money, and they had more jobs, and it had completely woken up the whole area. But actually, we're just terrified of the debate. But it seems,
well, concerns about mental health, concerns about
absolutely, but can we please have this debate? But can we leave out the medical cannabis and just say that, of course, we can prescribe cannabis for children for as a medicine?
I mean, people take heroin effectively for pain relief in hospital situations, so medicinal drugs should be a no-brainer.
OK, we're out of time on this part, but we're going to be back in just a couple of moments, and we'll be looking at why baby boomers will be expected to work into their retirement age. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, former advisor to the Labour Party, Scarlett Maguire, and the editor of Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. We're going to turn to The Guardian now. Brexit for you, Brendan, and a warning from the chief of GCHQ.
Yes, so this is the latest Brexit story. The chief of GCHQ is contradicting Michel Barnier, effectively, who was suggesting, well, firstly, he was telling Britain that we won't be able to remain part of the European arrest warrant system and other security measures across Europe once we leave. And his implication was that Britain might be in a bit of trouble, won't be able to contribute to security measures, and might even face a greater threat as a consequence of leaving the European Union. And the head of GCHQ has come in and said, well, you know, we play an important role and we still can. I think what this story points to is that really all that hardcore Remainers or Ramonas have left, and Barnier is the king of Ramonas, is the politics of fear. And really everything they're now suggesting is that if Britain leaves the EU, which 17.4 million people have said we must, everything will go to hell in a handcart. The economy will collapse, politics will die, will become like Nazi Germany, and there'll be terrorism all over the place. It's all they have left is fear.
I'm just going to bring in the front of the Times, a story also on that front page. Scarlett?
Yes, I mean, what Michel Barnier said was that if we leave Europe, we therefore leave a lot of the European institutions. This isn't about fear, this is about fact. Actually, Michel Barnier is not a Ramona. Michel Barnier is a career civil servant who wants to get a Brexit deal so that he can knock it up to a notch. He actually is quite happy for Britain to leave. That is absolutely... That is
no, they don't want us out.
Brendan, I am going to talk. This thing about what GCHQ is saying, hold on, we want to be part of it. And Barnier is saying, yeah, we can do private deals, we can do bilateral deals on security, but you're not going to have the strategy in there. This isn't a fear thing. This is a fact. This is a fact. If we leave Europe, we're not going to be in the European institutions. Why Brendan thinks this is a fear thing is beyond.
I'm going to have to move us on because we do want to squeeze in one more paper before we run out of time. I'm sorry, Brendan. You can talk more about it in the next hour. The Express, though, 23 million face working until they drop, according to the Express.
Absolutely. I mean, I have friends who've retired. I don't know how they have good pensions. I don't. I have no idea when I can stop working, but I'm lucky. I love what I do. I think it's really, really tough if you've got a job that is just grinding you down. And I dread what's going to happen when you get, you know, 69-year-old teachers who would have liked to have left the profession about 20 years earlier.
I agree, and I think the Express says that people will have to work past, a lot of people will work past 70 before they can finally give up and retire. It's going to affect baby boomers primarily to begin with, and I think this actually is a useful story to remind us that baby boomers don't have it as easy and cushy as people often make out. There's a lot of anti-baby boomer sentiment around these days, particularly from millennials. I'm lucky to come from...
They've got it easy.
They've got it easy, and millennials have got the worst lives imaginable. I'm lucky to come from... I'm Generation X, so I'm kind of somewhat somewhere in the middle of the two and I can watch them fighting. But I think a lot of the arguments against baby boomers and the idea that they had these wonderful lives is actually completely thrown into question by stories like this, and the fact that a lot of them are struggling and a lot of them don't actually make a great wage, have tough jobs, and now will have to carry on doing those jobs until they're 70 or older. So it's a nice reminder that all generations have it tough in the current economy, and a bit of solidarity across generations wouldn't be a bad thing.
Scarlett, the figures keep on creeping up. The retirement age of 65 is a different memory.
Is it absolutely? I mean, what's so interesting is the Express says, should the state pension age be kept at 65? It's not 65 now. I mean, it's going up and up and up. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great being able to work for as long as you want. I think what's awful is being forced to work.
OK. Scarlett, Brendan, thanks very much. We'll have more coming up in the next hour here on Sky News. Coming up, lots more at 11. Let's turn to the Express now. And we're looking at Brexit.
Brexit, love Brexit.
And the Lords.
This is a really interesting story, and I'm amazed it's not getting bigger coverage, which is that some MPs, including Labour MP Frank Field, is obviously very pro-Brexit, one of the tiny numbers.
So this is the comment piece, just
yes, they're calling for the Lords. He and a few others are calling for the Lords to be scrapped because of how they're behaving. The thing is, what we have to reckon with is the fact that the Lords is currently out of control. The way they are treating the elected government and the way they are insulting the 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit is really outrageous. This is an unelected chamber full of the great and the good who basically look upon voters as the great unwashed and see it as their responsibility to correct our alleged mistakes. They are behaving arrogantly, undemocratically and almost tyrannically. Frank Field is absolutely right. We need now to have a very serious public discussion about abolishing the House of Lords once and for all and having a proper democratic system.
Well, I think the two things should be separated. I think that the House of Lords as it is should be abolished. It's all political appointments or hereditary, but both of which are equally bad. But it's interesting that it's the pro-Brexit Tories and pro-Brexit Frank Field who don't like the House of Lords because they're doing what they don't like. I mean, actually, if you look at what the House of Lords, all they're asking for is that can the Commons have a meaningful vote? That's all it is.
But the Commons said they don't want it.
They didn't say they didn't want it. Theresa May said to the rebels, I will give you a meaningful vote, and then she backed down. So
Theresa May,
that's what she said last week. That's why it's gone back to the Lords. She promised them a meaningful vote. You talked to Dominic Grieve. You talked to the people who were in that meeting with her, which was at the last minute. I mean, this is a government that makes policy on the hoof. That
she promised them. She talked about concessions on 2/3 of the Dominic Green amendment, didn't she? And then that they would look into.
But the thing is, this is the fact. Theresa May was elected by 13 million people. Brexit was voted for by 17.4 million people. The Lords didn't get one single vote from any of us. We have no control over them whatsoever, and they are pushing back on the elected government again and again. Now, you're not wrong, in fact, that pro-Brexit Tories are opportunistically now saying, oh, get rid of the Lords because they're doing something we don't like. However, the flip side to that is that leftists and even so-called radicals who would traditionally be anti-Lords are now incredibly stum about this because they love what the Lords are doing, which is overriding the largest democratic vote in British history.
I have just said that I think the House of Lords, as it is now, should be an elected. However, the different thing is what they're actually doing. I do not understand why people like you think that it's wrong to have a meaningful vote. I do not understand why Parliament cannot be in control.
Just quickly then, I'll tell you why. Because MPs...
Because we're going to get a bad deal. We're going to get a bad deal, and you know it, and you think we'll just get a bad deal.
MPs, like every other citizen of this country, had a meaningful vote on the 23rd of June 2016. That's democracy. Every vote is equal. What they now want is an additional vote because they think they're more important than us.
No,
That's what it is.
What they want is to say that we do not have Brexit negotiations done by pretty crummy people who can't eat. We haven't even got the beginning. We don't even know where we are. We want that when it comes back to Parliament, that we can say yes, no, or maybe. Go away and get us something better. And I don't understand why you're so worried about this. I want a good deal.
And it's back in the Commons tomorrow. We'll know more by this time tomorrow. We're going to take a short break now. But when we come back, was it the World Cup or the royal wedding that topped the television ratings? Before we run out of time, though, let's have a look at The Sun. Again, talking about cannabis oil at the top on the Sun, if we can just bring that up. But the main story is Harry topples Meghan. Not Prince Harry, the other Harry.
The two Harry. Well, Harry Kane rules over Prince Harry by the looks of it, because 21 million people watched the England v Tunisia game, including me, in a pub with a rowdy crowd. And only 13 million people watched Harry and Meghan's wedding. I love this story because it's a really important reminder that football is more important to British people than the royal family. It's the people's sport. You know, there's all this talk about this now being the people's monarchy and so on, which I think was exaggerated. It's worth reminding ourselves that football remains an incredibly popular, populist, fun pastime, and it's a good story. People are collectively engaged with an important global competition, and that's a good thing.
Well, I mean, 13 million people watching Harry and Meghan's wedding. I mean, that's pretty good by today's standards as well. 2 billion people watching worldwide. I don't know what the worldwide figures are for the World Cup.
Actually, I mean, in spite of all the furore around it, I mean, it was fewer people than watched William and Kate. Interestingly, where this was a big deal. There were masses of stories. She was already famous in North America. I mean, I'd never seen Suits. I have to say, I managed to miss both of them. But I did have a look at the dress.
Yes.
And actually, I flicked over every now and again, and I got one of the goals. I was pleased that England won, but I had better things to do than to watch.
Not a World Cup fan. Brendan's raising his eyebrows. That's all we've got time for. Scarlett, Brendan, thank you both very much indeed.